Well, good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or whatever it is, wherever you are. Welcome back to Driven
Most of
to
the people who watch
Reality.
this stuff have insomnia and they get up in the middle of the night saying, "These guys will put me back to sleep."
That's
So,
all four of them. That's really true.
yeah,
I've noticed the
good
following.
early morning to everybody. Number
Yes,
56.
it is.
I did a training back in the spring for a bunch of super high professionals, the real leadership type CEOs and all that jazz. And they wanted us to put together a seminar that was memorable. So we came up with 3 points because most people can't remember any more than 3 points anyway. And so the first one was uh, know your canaries,
Right.
and that is be aware of the symptoms and early signs that you're kind of getting over a tipping edge. You know yourself really well. Just be aware of the canaries that indicate something's getting off and then start acting out. Second one was pick your nose carefully
Right.
so that you can pick your yeses even more carefully.
That's correct.
Learn how to say no. And that really only applies if you're good at what you do, because nobody's going to ask you to do anything if you're just plain crappy at it. But if you're really good at it, you get a lot of requests and you'll have to
Yep.
learn how to say. And today, yes,
Today we are going to talk about giving yourself permission, which
our third
sounds
point.
maybe a little strange, but it's also one of those things that we have found in working with people, and particularly in the emotional systems and with life, how few people actually know how to do that.
So do you
Or,
remember, Mike, the original expression that we were attempting to address by having this third point for the executives and executive level staff?
no,
This is a counterpoint to the oft quoted don't wait for permission, ask for forgiveness.
that's right. That's
Okay?
right.
Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness.
Right.
And the concept of that quote, whatever we call that little quip, is you're going to get in trouble if you go ahead and act, and you're going to have to apologize for what you did. So go ahead and do it anyway, and then don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness later.
Right. And you're hoping that the outcome is going to be a positive thing because you're risking to do whatever, and that takes courage and so on and so on and so on. But yes, you're right. Now I do remember.
Yeah.
So this was
So
a
we had that. So
very
we gave
different.
our third point was give yourself permission. And it's pretty carefully drawn line between give yourself license and give yourself permission.
Right.
That's really kind of the careful concept we're trying to communicate in this principle of give yourself permission.
Right. So let's just jump into kind of how this works from the standpoint of okay, what in the world does that mean in the way that we're describing, particularly in our scenario, why do people act that way? What is it they're doing to you, and what can you do about it? So where do we go with that when it comes to giving yourself permission?
Okay, so psychobabble, blah, blah, blah. Mike and I both have a great wealth of deep doo-doo in psychology, but there is a valid concept in the psychobabble world called the locus of control. That's
Right.
Latin. You have to translate that. The location of control in
Right.
your life.
Right.
So if the locus of control is external, then you go to that external authority, power, point person, whatever it is, and you either ask that person for their permission
Right.
or for their forgiveness. When that expression gets made, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. What that says to me immediately is the locus of control for that person is external.
Exactly.
They're waiting for someone else to
Exactly.
say you're valid, you're permitted, you can do it.
Right.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. Let me applaud. The locus of control is external.
Right.
With the idea of give yourself permission, sounds really simple, but what we're saying is move the locus of control to an internal
Correct.
source. That
Correct.
sounds psycho, yeah, but it means the point person of your life is you. It's inside of who you are. Now, I understand the give God permission. I understand all the Christianese. That's still part of it. God is working inside of you. You are dealing with what you believe is the right thing to do. We're talking about the way power works, the way control works in your life regarding an event that happens. If you wait for permission or you ask for forgiveness, what you're saying to yourself is the controls of my life, the buttons that run my life, don't belong to me anymore.
Right. And don't misconstrue what we're saying from the standpoint of, getting forgiveness for something that went wrong. We're not talking about the concept of forgiveness here. We're talking about the aspect of giving yourself permission in life on a consistent basis. Um, some of the things we could probably even dive into without getting too deep in the weeds is okay, well, what is that? What does that mean? Well, it's amazing to me where we will be in situations, people will be in situations where they have been wounded by someone else, maybe a coworker, maybe in a religious organization, maybe in a social organization, um, and or maybe in, the wounding has happened in your upbringing or however that kind of thing. We are incredibly good at denying the fact that there's actual hurt there.
Right.
And so
Or
then what do we
confusion, or deep
right,
mud, or something that
right,
slows you down,
right,
spider webs all over you. I mean, it's not necessarily that you have a bleeding wound, it's that
exactly,
something is stopping you from taking a forward step according to your own plan and
right,
desire,
right,
whatever that happens to be.
right. So the question is, is there this other motivation that is keeping you from giving yourself permission to deal with this? Um, Grief is a really, I mean, it's probably a really good illustration of what happens when people do not give themselves permission to grieve,
Right.
uh, whether that's in significant loss of someone passing away, or if that's, a broken relationship or, a lost, smashed car that, was your baby, giving yourself permission to say, it's
And oddly
okay.
enough, all the way down to you've had a blueberry pie on the counter and one of your kids came in and ate the last piece. It's how the human mind deals with loss is
Right.
really amazing, because if you had spent some time thinking about that piece of pie, I'm not equating the last piece of pie with the death of your spouse. What
Exactly.
I'm saying is the grieving process is the same reality
That's right.
regardless of the loss itself. The
Right.
grieving will be minimal for something that doesn't matter to you, and it will
Right.
be maximized by something that does matter to you. And
Right.
it's not for us to sit here and say that last piece of pie doesn't matter. Come on,
Correct.
grow up. Don't
Right.
even think about, go get another pie. It's not
Right.
about that. To
Exactly.
you, if that really matters, you're going to grieve over that loss.
Right. And your feelings are your feelings. They're
Right.
not someone else's. And it's always amazing to me how people will say this phrase, and I would encourage you, please do not use this phrase. I know just how you feel. No, you don't, because your feelings are not their feelings.
Right.
And you might be able to associate because you've had something similar, but to say to someone, I know how you feel, is not true.
That,
It just
that
does
really
not.
raised an interesting point that we might want to spend a future podcast on. We're not going to do that right immediately, but when a person supplants a part of the journey that someone else is going through with their own story,
Right.
that's a power play.
It is a
That
power
there's
play.
something going on about power. So you say, I had trouble with my car. What happened? I was driving down the road and got a flat tire. And the person who says, oh, that's nothing. I was driving down the road, my
Yeah.
tire actually fell off the car.
Yeah.
Like, I want to
Well,
commandeer. I know you want to tell your story about a flat tire and how much that mattered to you when you were late for an appointment and kind of
right.
embarrassing. But I'm
Right.
going to overtake the story,
Right.
and you'll find that there will be certain people for whom every conversation is an opportunity to overpower.
Right.
But we're not going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about that in the
Right.
future. We're not gonna, but that's part of
Right.
what the issue is.
And that's correct. And I would call one-upmanship. I'm going to do one better than
Now
you.
that's extremely sexist because that
Right.
leaves women out. It's one up personship.
Okay.
Okay, so
One
I don't even know what a good word for that is.
one humanship. Okay. What
One
can
one up ship.
what up? That's be really careful how you say that.
Anyway. So the idea of give yourself permission in the book that we're dealing with all the time, which we go out and teach on. By the way, if you ever need really good seminar leaders or some workshop stuff, Mike and I do that a lot. But that's beside the point. No more commercials. But buy the book; it's on Amazon. It's called "Why Do People Act That Way?"
Right.
That's a question that comes out of your mouth frequently during the day. Why do people do that? It's so stupid. But the second question really has to do with this give yourself permission idea. What can I do
Right.
about it?
Right.
So, as Mike was saying, there's a grieving process. What can you do about it? Say, well, I'll take
Right.
6 weeks off and go to the Bahamas. Yeah, I can't do that.
Right.
I mean, I physically, financially, time wise, work wise, I can't do that. Okay.
Right.
So that is not something you can do about it. What is something you can do about it? And that really comes back to is the locus of control for me inside my own life,
Right.
me and God, me and the way I process everything, or is it external? And when you say the expression, it may very well pop out of your mouth, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. Think this thought. This is about power. I'm
Right.
describing the power does not belong to me.
Right.
Why?
Right.
What can I do? That's really the principle we're teaching.
Right. I mean, in the whole depths of what it's amazing to me of where people are being denial on all kinds of levels. Um, and again, it can be significant, it can be very minor, but if we're not willing to give ourselves permission to work through whether, particularly when it's an internal kind of thing. So, in the context, let me, see if we can pull up another one here that um, that we deal with quite frequently, and that is the whole issue of anger, of giving yourself permission to be angry about something because your whole life, or however you've been taught, virtually says, I can't be angry about anything because anger is a bad thing. And or maybe one that's easier for you, which anger tends to be a part of emotionally, is the whole idea of conflict. I've been dealing with this with a few people along the way. Is that conflict? I can't do conflict. Conflict is bad, and so I'm going to deny myself the ability to deal with conflict because that's bad. And yet, the conflict that's taking place is hurting you. It's driving how you're living your life. It's driving how you're parenting your children. It's driving your relationships because this conflict, you're so in much denial of, well, I just can't deal with that because that's not a good thing. I'm a bad person if I deal with conflict. Well, just on the simple surfaces of what Mike and I would say, particularly when it comes to the issue of conflict, is that first off, conflict in and of itself is not a is neutral because of that kind of dynamic. But conflict is if conflict is there for any outside of anything else for change that brings about resolution, then yeah, you got a problem with whoever is doing conflict. But if you don't give yourself permission to deal with that and put it in the context of conflict is a good thing. Nothing's going to happen if there is never conflict. I mean, it's the world is built around that. But if you see it as something that you have to suppress all the time because it's bad, we're going, no. Conflict is about change that is always meant to bring about resolution. And if that's
Well, hopefully. I mean,
hopefully that's where you're
you
right.
hopefully have reconciliation or some kind of
Right.
a coming together, but that doesn't always happen. One of the reduction strategies of stress, and the stress can be fear, it can be anger, it can be being overly addicted to something. It doesn't matter what the stress is. But there one of the solutions to stress has to do with being one or two steps ahead of what's going on right now. Here's really the strategy.
Exactly.
Mike and I have spent our entire careers, close to 50 years each, working with people, analyzing what's going on, studying human behavior. Well, this has been our lives. So we have a huge amount of content that goes into conversations and conflict resolution, blah, blah, blah. Okay, we're not trying to build ourselves up here. The reality is when you don't have that great wealth, what can you do?
Exactly.
And here's what we're advocating: slow down the moment
Right.
and at least say to yourself, are there two different outcomes or three that I can imagine will happen right now? Two or three. If you can actually think of those two or three, you're one step ahead of what's going on in the situation.
Right.
It seems like that is going to make it worse, but it doesn't. Then if A or an adaptation of A happens, you already thought of that. Or B, you already thought of that. Or C, you already
Right.
thought of that. And
Right.
you're now one step ahead. What can I do about it?
Right.
One practical solution is look at two or three options. Mike and I could come up with 20 or 30, but we're experts in doing this. When you're new at it, try and think of one or two
Right.
that puts
Exactly.
you a step ahead, not of the other person or persons, but one or two steps ahead of yourself.
Right.
It's
Right.
about giving yourself permission to think what could happen and what can you do then.
Right.
Now, when any one of A, B, or C happens, you already have a step down that pathway.
Right.
That will reduce your stress amazingly.
Exactly. Exactly. And one of the things, and this sounds probably, how do I say, like, oh, you just are old fuddy duddies. But the reality of it
Or
is
what you say
no.
is you guys are old fuddy duddies. That's how
Yeah.
you say it.
Is that how you say it?
Fuddy
So,
duddies is a word that anyone under 40 hasn't even heard. Elmer Fudd, they don't even know who Elmer Fudd is, but we
uh,
do.
the concept,
Look it up
and,
on
and
Google.
and I mean, quite frankly, if you want to spend any time validating this, is to look up and spend some time doing a little research about how distracted we are in our lives. And the major distraction of which we wrestle with on a daily basis, and Mike and I were just having this conversation, particularly in relationship to some folks, is has to do with electronic media and to the ability that we seem to be having of not to un to unhook from it. Um, and there's all
The
kinds of
proper
research.
word is disengage.
Thank you. There's
Yeah.
lots there, but there's now that we've actually had social media for 15 years and almost 20 years, kind of things happening. Now all the research is starting to come out, and it's starting to show that people are they Mike says, think through how you're going to do this. The problem with happens so many from a practical standpoint is like, well, but I don't know how to do that. Well, the first thing in my mind for you to do is to unhook, turn it off, put it put the phone in the other room, walk away for 2 hours, go for a walk, sit on your deck, but don't have any electronic input. I was talking with a guy who's almost 30. The other day we're working on his car, and he's lives with another guy, a couple roommates, and they have this house. And he's not a he has to use his phone. He's got two phones. I mean, he's got all this inundation all the time of coming in and out, and he gets to a point he just goes, okay, I'm done. But he says the problem is I live with a guy who owns the house, and he's got like two or three TVs all in the house, and they're all on, and they're all on the news feeds, and they're all in the stuff that just keeps everybody churning. And it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on. The input is built on either side of the fence in our culture right now, just to capture you, so you want to hear more, but it just keeps people churning, churning, churning,
Right.
churning. And what we're talking about is that, you know quality of life, of giving yourself permission, means that you're going to have to figure out a way to disengage, so at least you can re-engage in your own mind in giving yourself permission to do what Mike is saying, where you can figure out one, two steps ahead emotionally what's going on in your life. But if all you're inundated from the time you wake up in the morning till the time you go to bed, and waking up in the middle of the night, and even with your electronic device, it's not going to happen. You're going to continue to just be frustrated with all of that. There is that psyche of which in our mind we need to be able to re-engage. I'll give you another little piece just for you to chew on, which is really actually quite scary. And what we're seeing, particularly Mike and I, because I guess because we're old enough to see it. And one of the things that people ask all the time is, why is it that people don't ask hard questions? Why is it they don't do critical thinking anymore? Well, the research is telling us the reason that critical thinking comes directly out of imagination. And when you have electronic devices, what they're finding with children who spend particularly their first 4 years of being socialized by electronic devices have very nil skill in critical thinking, because it takes away their ability to use their imagination,
Hmm.
because it's all right there. So they don't have to do anything. It just keeps feeding them, but it's feeding them somebody else's imagination, and they're just pulling in what somebody else has developed. So for them to be able to think critically, because that side of their brain is not being developed. It's not, it's
So it's
not
like any muscle atrophy. You
exactly,
don't use
exactly.
it, you lose it.
You lose it. And that's exactly what's going on. So consequently, you have you have several generations at this point that are struggling with being able to think through processes And when they come to work, they don't know how to participate because they can't think outside, we would say outside the box, in a critical sense of the dynamic of what could possibilities be. That side has been really atrophied in very, very much sense. So all that to say is that if you want to be able to move forward and giving yourself permission and get one or two steps in front of things, that whole aspect of unhooking and giving yourself some time to be able to think through and develop that is critical. Now, the good news is also what they're finding, that if people will do that part, where they'll pull themselves away and start to develop, in developing their imagination, they can change, and they can, that exercise of the brain's amazing.
So you
But
start using a muscle and you'll
exactly,
recover the lost
exactly,
strength from atrophy. That's good.
exactly.
Anyway, so our principle today is give yourself permission.
Yep,
And that is not licensed, so you can go and punch your neighbor in their face or
that's right.
spit on or walk at. It's not about being as destructive or rude as you want to be.
Right.
It really is move the locus of control from exterior to interior.
Right.
Instead of allowing every other situation or persons or whatever the events of your life might be requiring to be in control of who you are and how you respond, begin to pull that back into yourself and give yourself permission to live your own life on your terms effectively. That's really the principle.
Yeah, that is
so let's not beat this to death because it's already dead.
We're done. Well, thank you for listening. This is West Coast Mike.
This is East Coast Mike. We got a new topic we're working on for next week. You want to tune in for episode 57, and this is going to be pretty intense. This has been a good one, but we got some stuff that's coming up the pipeline that is pretty intense.
Yep. All right. Thanks for listening.